Why if I just take it?
And it just kept rolling off for just.
People like their soda.
It's okay. I have never heard of it. Never known.
It takes a certain, you have to have a certain power.
Yeah, no, I say that, aren't
A lot of quotes.
Although we're allowed to do the engine. It's perfect for her. That's what I like about it. Yeah. Perfect for her.
Oh, Jane.
we have to get that massage.
I have a steamer, a nasal steamer at home. Down it.
No, I wasn't. No, but I wouldn't. But.
No, this is just the,
Believe that you're desperate to
I
eat
also
it.
have the, like, I typed up thoughts, printed them out, and those are now correct.
when I had to announce it.
So is it inappropriate to, since I potentially weren't you gonna pay?
It's
60. Just
Okay. That totally makes sense.
I said I would describe it.
You ready to go? This meeting of the board is now called to order. Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody, to the meeting on this cold evening, and we'll get started by approving our agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda as printed?
From administration.
Is there a motion, please, to approve?
President Benning, I move that the Board of Education approve the agenda as printed.
Thank you, Terry. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Emily, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We move forward with our agenda, and that means we start with the superintendent's report. Mark?
Thank you, sir. We have 3 items on the reports agenda, and the first of that is a bond project update, and Johnny Edwards will present that.
Thank you. Good evening tonight. Thank you, Superintendent Beelang, as well as members of the Board of Education. My update is brief. Our auditorium refresh project from 2015 bond dollars. The new speakers in the high school auditoriums have been hung. The new amplifiers and projectors have also been installed. We are waiting for the new lights to be delivered. We're expecting them to be delivered sometime near April. The speakers have been programmed, commissioned, and tuned to ensure that they are working properly. With this phase complete, we're waiting for the lighting control package, and that's what's remaining. And again, we're hoping to have that in April. In terms of our 2021 elementary bond, this past Friday, January 29th, we held our 9th design development meeting. In this meeting, OAK presented a preliminary cost to the design. We worked as a team to review the line items and discuss some preliminary ways in which we could potentially continue to revise some areas to bring down costs. In short, we'll continue to use our guiding principles as our means for decision making. We would like to bring a preliminary budget allocation to the board sometime next month for both schools. And finally, within that project, we're working with the city of Portage on our site plans for both Central L and Haverhill. So due to our partnerships, obviously, with the city, due to water, sanitation, and other things, we have a collaboration in terms of them approving portions of our site plan. So that concludes my presentation tonight, or my update tonight. I'll be happy to answer any questions from the board.
Thanks, Johnny.
Thank you.
Second report is our monthly financial report from Paula Johnson. Paula?
Good evening, Board of Ed and Superintendent Beelang, and welcome to the new members, Kimberly, Ian, and Emily. Included in your board packet was the financial report through December 31st. That's halfway through the fiscal year. I'd like to touch on just a couple of high points, but to give some of the new board members a little bit of background on this report. We are required to report expenditures to Michigan Department of Ed on an annual basis for our finances, and this report is comprised, the first page breaks out our 26-digit account code, which every section of that account stands for something that we report back to MDE. It breaks it out by function code, and the second page breaks it out by object code. You will see a lot of the budget documents that come to you for approval in a format very similar to this. So what this report does is it compares a snapshot of this fiscal year compared to a year ago at this time. And I'm going to point out just a couple highlights between both pages and give you just a little brief update on what's starting to happen with next year's budget. Under local revenue, we are up in local revenue compared to last year for a couple of different reasons. Our property tax values increased, and so our state aid pays us the net balance after we receive property tax revenue, so I'm adjusting values in the revenue and expenditures in the amendment that's coming to the board next month in February. Our Curious Kids program has ran all year compared to a previous year when we were under COVID. It started late in September. Athletic gate receipts are up. Moving down to local payments from other districts. This is the category that houses payments that we receive from KRESA for our special education millage and our enhancement millage. And our enhancement millage payments are lagging compared to last year, so that's why we're down in this category. We actually just received a check today from KRESA for the enhancement millage payment. Moving down to expenditures, I'd like to touch on pupil support. There's a variance, a small percentage variance showing, but if you look at the actual numbers last year compared to this year, there's a higher expenditure being spent in that area, and we're really starting to utilize the mental health money, the 31N6 money, and so that was not showing a year ago at this time, and now it's in these expenditures through the end of December. Moving down to instructional staff, this line holds the function category 221, which is improvement of instruction, and we are trying to focus a lot on improving instruction through the ESSER dollars that we've received. And so included in this category this time compared to last year are a lot of one-time funding sources that we're using the federal funds for, such as letters training, library book purchases for the buildings, student assessment software, curriculum PD work costs, and substitute costs and purchase service costs are also up in this area. Moving down to central support services a little further down, we're showing up from last year compared to this year because we did have a very large staff Chromebook purchase that we received this year using ESSER one-time funding. So the second page of this report breaks it out by object, and the only thing that I really want to point out to the board is the same thing that I just pointed out. If you look at the supply line, there is quite a variance there, and that does constitute those staff Chromebooks that were purchased. So this is just a tool to use. I just requested some federal money on Friday from Michigan Department of Ed, so our federal, back up on the revenue side, our federal is showing a little bit low compared to what we've actually spent, but that's not coming out in the report that you're looking at. Also, just a quick update, legislators are starting the process to build the budget for next year already. The governor put out her State of the State address last week on Wednesday night. She touched on her high points of where she's going to focus for her budget, and House and Senate will come through with their recommendations. So this is just the starting process of where we will end up to find out what funding will be for next school year. And count day is February 8th. So that's all I have. Any questions?
Well, just a process question, then we will do our first budget amendment next month?
Yes, we're working on that now.
Oh, yeah.
Staff and I are diligently working on it now.
Thank you.
Good report,
Paul.
Thanks.
Thank you for the explanations. No problem.
Yeah, the next item on the superintendent report is not so much an item, but a recognition of board member service to the district. Each January of each year, I'm not sure who does the naming of this, it's probably done somewhere at the legislative level, is designated School Board Member Recognition Month. So we'd like to recognize our board members, and I'm going to step around and do this so it makes it a little easier for me. But we want to present board members with just a token of appreciation through a certificate that acknowledges your service. And I know we have 3 members who are new, and then we have like the other wave that, I wouldn't say 3 board members that are old, but 3 board members who have several years of service under their belts. So thank you.
You have wisdom.
We do appreciate your continuing and newly kind of found commitment to the work it takes to be a board member and reviewing your materials in advance to make sure that members are prepared to have effective discussions at the board table and to ask the questions that are thoughtful and insightful and maybe something that we haven't thought of as we're presenting our recommendations. So we thank you for your service and your commitment to our children. Hope that you're able to stay and continue to stay focused on what's best for all of our students as we make decisions on their behalf. So we have a certificate for you, and also a little a gift certificate that it's a credit towards the purchase of some PPS swag from our school store that you can probably wear out in the community. So, Kimberly, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Make sure I've got these in the right order. So.
Thank you.
Bo, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Andy, appreciate your
Thank you,
service.
Mark. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Can we have a nice round of applause for you?
Moving on to board education, sir.
We have two items to report back to you, and I'm gonna have Michelle introduce the presenter on this audit, but I just wanted to preface her comments with just saying that organizations that are interested in getting better take on some difficult work. We embarked on a continuous improvement journey several years ago, and really through our surveys that we've done, through the feedback that we get from our community, our staff, and our students, we kind of lay bare some of the things that we need to improve on. And so as we moved through that process and understood that better, we wanted to do the same thing with evaluating, taking a look at district communications. As you know, during COVID, communications became very difficult and tricky, and navigating that, we've begun establishing some systems of communication, but we wanted to take a thorough look at everything that we do from a standpoint of communications. So we worked with National School Public Relations Association, and I'm going to stop there because if I keep talking, Michelle won't have anything to say. So, Michelle, do you mind coming up and introducing Tom?
Good evening, Superintendent Beeling, trustees. Yeah, and for the new board members, some months ago I was before you telling you about this process that we're going to undertake with the National School Public Relations Association. Our district is part of the Michigan School Public Relations Association, of which I'm a board member. And so I found out about this process through my work there. And so it really is something that holds us up to national standards. It was something that the superintendent and I began talking about prior to COVID as a way to, again, take a thorough look at what we're doing, improve upon what we're doing well, and improve upon even more of those things that we're not doing so well. And so I was very excited when, after we kind of got through COVID, to be able to undertake this process. And I'm very pleased with the results of the audit, not so much because we're doing everything perfectly, we're absolutely not, but because now we know what we need to work on and what we have a direction for. So I'm going to turn you over to Tim Carroll, who is our auditor. Tim is an APR, which means he's accredited in public relations since 1985, so he's got a few years of experience. He currently teaches public relations and writing at Texas Christian University. He's also taught at Texas A&M, and he was the Chief Information Officer and Director of Public Information at the Allen Independent School District, 21,500 students in Allen, Texas, before he retired there. And so he just has a wealth of knowledge. He has worked with the National School Public Relations Association accrediting process for about the last 11 years, and I've seen him speak at workshops and other things as well. So I was pretty excited when he was assigned our auditor. So I'm going to turn the dais over to him for the report, and then I'll have some follow-up comments on what kind of where we're going next step after this this audit report. So, Tim.
Thank you, and hello, good evening, board members. Those of you, welcome back. For some of you that I met, for the new board members, I'm Tim Carroll, as you just heard. So I had the pleasure of talking to some of the board members before, but I'll be glad to answer any questions. I'm going to go through kind of a brief summary of the audit. You have a copy of the full audit report here at your place. And this PowerPoint, I've got to cover the highlights of that, but I obviously didn't put all that information in there, but I'd be glad to answer questions about anything at the end of this. That's where we go. The audit, as already been mentioned, the audit is an assessment of everything, but it's commonly, we think of audits, we think finance, don't find anything wrong in the audit. A financial audit, when people find things in financial audit, it's always like, that's not a good thing or something like that. But there's audits in a lot of other areas. There's audits in curriculum, audits in technology, and other areas to just kind of look at what we're doing, best practices, and what do we need to change. And that's what this is. It doesn't really mean something's wrong as much as something could be improved. And you actually have a pretty strong communications program, especially for a school district this size. And so at the end of all this, even though there's a lot of things in here, I don't want you to leave with the impression of, wow, what's going on here kind of thing. It's not that at all. But I will point out some things I think that are interesting to work with, including some things the board can have some fun with. Okay, let's see. Oh, I bet it's off, isn't it? There we go. You told me to turn it on. So first thing she said, turn it on, and then I don't follow instruction very well. Anyway, I'm Tim Carroll, and then that's the group. I work for the National School Public Relations Association. It's a pool of auditors that get called upon to go to different places and do audits. And so that's the group that, even though I'm the person that visited the site and the person that wrote the initial report, it's actually vetted pretty heavily by, especially Melissa Brom, who's in charge of all the audits, and they make changes, and just like an editor would be at a newspaper or something like that. So there's a lot of other people's hands in this by the time it gets to you. And that's, what we're talking about. They talk about it. Communications audit is kind of a program, GPS for the program. It's, what are you doing as well? How do we get to the other point and things like that? And let me give you some better examples of that than that cute little graphic. So it's a comprehensive assessment of the current efforts the district has. It's also a snapshot of perceptions about the district. So it's not just, I didn't just come in and say, oh, this is what they're doing. Let me look and see what's happening. Also, I spent time talking to groups of citizens, staff members, a lot of different people. I spent 2 days here in October doing nothing but sitting and interviewing different groups of people. And you'll see some of the results from that. But that's a key part of this whole process. And then also, NSBRA, the national group, adds their baseline information on what best practices are around the country based on their observations. And you may or may not know that Michigan is actually one of the birthplaces of school communications, public relations. It's been around a long time in the state, and the association itself was almost started by some people from closer to the Detroit area. So it's got a long history. So the audit itself, the first thing I did was review all the district materials, the print, digital publications, things like that, look at all the policies, communications policies, campaigns. This is something that Michelle and her staff had to put together for me. Probably took them about a month to put together before I came out to visit everything. And then I also look at media coverage for the district. I also do my own research. I'll Google something as simple as Googling your school district and looking at how it pops up and what's going on in your district, but then also looking at social media and other things and how things are interacting with the district. So it's a pretty big picture by the time we get done with it. One of the things that NSBRA does now, NSBRA, the National Association, is it provides a survey tool prior to the visit. And so I got a comprehensive survey of teachers, faculty and staff, parents and family, and also the community. This is just the summary page of who took the survey, not the survey results, but the survey results are in the report in front of you. So we did a different survey for faculty and staff, different one for parents and family, and a different one for the community. And the community one was sent out. I'm not sure how it was distributed, but it was sent out in public where anybody in the community could take the survey. Actually, all of these were open surveys. In addition to that, we did interviews. Of course, I interviewed the superintendent and interviewed the communication staff. Then I also met with key stakeholders, and that was in October 24th, 25th. There's a list of the groups that I met with, 11 different focus groups over a couple of days. And that's really the core of the audit, because face-to-face with people in a room, and it's all anonymous. I don't take names of the people that are there. When I meet with them, I encourage them to speak their piece, and some of the questions are wide open. What do you like? What don't you like? And people are more than willing to share sometimes. And so all that information goes into the audit. There's no, we don't take names and attribute anything to that, but we do include all that. So that's the setup for it. So so we have findings, and then after the findings, we have observations of the auditor and the team, and then we have the recommendations. So these are some of the key findings. One of the findings, of course, is that the school district has a strong academic performance and reputation. They have a strong academic performance because you're here and you see that, but also the reputation of the school district outside the district and in the community. When I talked to all the groups, without doubt, the number one comment that came up was, this is a really good school district. Parents want their children to go to school here. They're getting a good education. We have good test scores. And then the second thing on that was we have killer performing arts programs. And I don't know about your performing arts programs, but it must be good because everybody was talking about your performing arts programs, which is a good thing. But in addition to that, the strength of the district also in the quality of teachers. And that's not just the teachers saying that. That really is a lot of people saying that the reason why the good academic performance is because the teachers in classrooms like this. And so that's something everybody's almost exclusively mentioned in various places when I spoke with them. Community support and pride is a strength of the district. You have support on your bond elections. You have people in the community. This is not a school district that's mired in some kind of controversy and everybody's fighting with each other and people are looking for a way out or something like that. It's a good school district. People are proud to be here. You have some big companies in town, as you well know, and that's good for the school district. It's really good because you have the support of those companies and corporate partnerships, but also those partnerships reflect support for the schools indirectly as well. So it's a circle that really benefits the school district. And then the participants, the parents I spoke with in specialized programs, whether it's performing arts again, IB, AP, programs like that, parents and students, I talked to high school students as well, were very proud of those programs and thought they were a real check mark for the school district, those kinds of things. One of the things we look for are challenges. What are some of the challenges the district faces? Some common themes from talking to all these people and the survey and everything else. One of the first ones is coming out of the COVID environment. There's still strong and differing opinions on how the school district should approach health and safety. Everyone's not in agreement on that, and I'm not going to offer an opinion on what's right or what's wrong, but I think we could all probably agree that people disagree on that topic, and it was very controversial, especially in the middle of the COVID crisis. And so the school district's still coming out of that and still trying to deal with that, and there's no question in the back of everybody's minds is this could happen again. That may not be the last time we go through this, and so how are we going to set ourselves up for that next time? So that's a challenge to the school district. It's not something they did wrong, but it's a challenge ahead of them. You are approaching a situation where you're going to have a more diverse student population. As the school district grows and ages, your population will change. You have new financial, economic situation for people in the community. You also have more people who are in the community either coming from non-English speaking families or limited English speaking families, and that affects communications. From my side, it affects communications with students, communications with parents, and so that's something the district's going to see more of, and you'll see your numbers. It won't grow quite as fast in a district this size, but like in a district of our size, 22,000, we could have 400 students move in that are non-English speaking in a year, so it challenges the district. You won't be at that situation, but even at a smaller level, it puts stress on the system. You have a challenge of maintaining support for future bond and millage proposals, which seems to be frequent in Michigan, if I did my research on that. And I'm not saying that you won't be successful, and I'm just saying it's going to be more and more of a challenge as the district goes forward. It's in the entire country. It's just the political climate is such that people are paying more attention to things like this and accepting that that's just what school districts do or that's what government does isn't really a standard anymore. And so I think transparency in the district having to be a little bit more, well, we'll explain that later, explaining how things go. And then the last thing, which your principals and your administrators mentioned, are you're going to have a challenge of attracting quality teachers. You've got a growing teacher candidate shortage. I don't know what the numbers were, but I know I heard a number when I was here that Western Michigan had graduated a very small number of students in the last go-around for their new teachers. And that's a small number to go around a lot of school districts in the state of Michigan as you age your other teachers out. So that's going to be an ongoing problem. It's not as much of a problem for a good district like Portage, but it is a challenge that you're going to be facing in the future, if more so. So in public relations, in the line of work that I'm in, there's a phrase we use, and I was talking about today. It says facts are negotiable and perceptions are not. What that really means is, we all know what the facts are, but if you perceive them to be different, then we have to have some discussion about it. And in public schools, there's a lot of facts that are there, and COVID would be one of them. This is the fact, but you think one thing, I think the other. And so we work a lot with perceptions. And so sometimes people will say something that doesn't mean they're right or wrong, but it means that's how they perceive it. So you as government officials and us as school administrators have to treat that as legitimate. It's not like, well, you're wrong and we can't talk about this. And so there's more and more challenges on that. So here's some themes of perceptions that we picked up on. One that is, in a good way, the District Improvement Initiative. The school district has been very involved in student education training. There really has been comments. I talked to people, staff members especially, but also some parents who really felt that customer service and the culture of the campuses had changed for the better and positive in the last couple of years. And I don't know the history of the school district in previous years, but they just kept saying it's a whole lot better now, and things are better, they look better, and the culture of the school, the word culture is used on several occasions. So I wanted to point that out to you. Parents appreciate social media platforms. Peach Jar is one of them. Used to be, if those of you that are school parents know, used to come home with a stack of papers from your kid's school and stuff like that. Something as simple as Peach Jar can make parents happy, and that's not just a trick. Everybody likes, schools like it too, but if we had a lot of Peach Jar type solutions, we'd be in a good place. But anyway, parents on the survey felt that building level communications are reliable. They like the building level communications, and it's a good source of information. As a matter of fact, most parents said they get the information about the school district from their campus. So that's a good thing and it's a bad thing. And the good thing is they have a reliable place to go. The bad thing is they're looking at the school for information they could be getting from somewhere else, and so we'll talk about that. And they did, when asked, people felt that the school board information on the website and in public is organized and accessible. So if you want to know what's going on at the school board, or you want to see a video of the school board meeting and stuff, it's out there. You all have, the board itself, and the, probably thanks to Barb, it's very transparent and accessible to people, and that's a good thing. All right, so some other perceptions. And the accuracy and timing of major announcements is a problem, according to the research that I did. And that doesn't mean that it's wrong all the time. It just means that sometimes it gets out a little bit late. And this is on major announcements, not on everything. But sometimes it's either it comes out late or the timing of it is where one of the issues that I heard from staff members was that information would be released at the same time to parents and to teachers. But the teachers might be in the classroom teaching at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they start getting text messages or emails about what's this or what are we doing with this or that, like in a school closing or something, and they're caught off guard because they don't even know what the information is yet. And so that's not a good example probably, but that's the kind of example that we had. So we've come up with some strategies for a lot of these things. Survey participants in all three groups felt they were not well informed about school district finances. And this kind of puzzled all of us because the school district actually has all your financial information is there. It's not hidden in any way. But regardless of that, this gets exactly to the point of perception and fact. Whether it's there or not doesn't matter if people think the information's not accessible or it's not what they're looking for. Some research and some poking needs to be done to find out what exactly is it that they're missing then. And it may be something very specific. It may be right to one thing occurred and they want to know whether it's maybe the federal funds or something, what do we do with this or that? But there wasn't a single thing that came out like the school district wasted this money or they did this or that. It wasn't like that at all. It was just on the survey at the bottom of knowledge and information, district finances came up. So it's one of those that we need to pay attention to in some way, probably do a little bit more research on. Staff members indicated they would like more involvement in decision-making and feel they should be informed about major decisions prior to parent-community communications. That is common to come from staff members, but it's also relevant because that's, we talked about the timing, but also the decision-making. Sometimes you can involve a lot of staff in decision-making. Other times decisions have to be made quickly or by this group here or somewhere else. And so, but once again, the communication of how those processes work maybe needs some work. And we'll talk about those in the recommendations. The chain of communication from the central office to the staff was identified as a problem area by teachers and administrators. And what they meant by that was sometimes things come from one department or they come from another, or they don't come quick enough. There's a lot of different variations on this, but all the variation is if I'm not getting the information I need as a person, I'm going to mark on my survey, it didn't work for me. But it wasn't a common theme like this is how to fix it. So my point on that one is that when information is released from central office to the campuses, and then the campus is releasing it from there to the parents, and then to the staff or whatever. It's not so much that it's not happening, but maybe it's the process itself. They'll stop and look at the whole process. Is it orderly? Does it make sense? Parents themselves, and if those of you who are parents are going to nod to this because everyone does, parents identified that school-to-home communications is a problem. They said there's too much of them. They didn't say any of them are bad. They liked them all. But I had one parent who had kids in 3 schools, and she said, I have almost 7 different platforms that I communicate with. I got my grades, I got my this, her kid's coach had his own platform, Dojo and Seesaw, and then of course the district's using Skyward. So that's something I think that if it's an issue with the parents, but I will tell you it's an issue with the parents for the last couple of years, ever since these technology platforms have become popular. Everybody's jumped on them, but it's very difficult for the school district to say we are now officially a Seesaw district or something. It just doesn't really, it's not that simple. But nevertheless, it needs to be looked at. If it's an issue coming up from the parents, it's a friendly issue. It's not a crisis, but it needs to be addressed probably, and maybe some meetings and find out what can be done to try to trim that down a little bit at least. Some other, one other issue here, or not issue, but a key finding was the non-English speaking parents. I met with a group of families, and we had translators in the evening. That evening it was actually very interesting. And one of their issues was they really stressed they really need more translation of school documents and school communications in their native language. And one of the moms stressed the point. She said, I don't like having my child have to read all my communications, because some of the communications come home were coming about my child. He's a nice kid, I mean, but he was a high school kid, spoke, spoke English very well, but he had to take everything that came home and he'd read it to his mom in Spanish. So that kind of thing, and the mom was kind of like, this isn't really working for me completely, and so, but her point was well taken. So your numbers aren't extremely high, so you're not lucky enough to have just lots and lots of kids, and you can hire a team of translators and have an office and everything else, but it's probably something the district needs to look at as you continue to grow. And I think Spanish is probably a predominant one that's coming up first, but, okay. So some other observations before we go to the recommendations, and check the time, okay. The school district values communications function. I want to compliment the district. I know the communications department's been here for a long time, but trust me, there's a lot of school districts either don't have communications or communications is really a function of some other department. The community relations director reports to the superintendent, which is the preferred path. So she's aware at the top level of things that are going on in the district and is kept in the loop on that, and that's very important, and that says something about the value of the district. Also, the fact that the superintendent and the communications director together requested this audit, because I've had situations where the superintendent requests the audit, but the communications person doesn't know it, or vice versa. It's let's just say everybody's on the same team. That's a good thing. Leave it at that. You've got a great academic reputation, but what was interesting when I was here was I couldn't get anybody to really articulate what it is you're good at. And I know it sounds like a marketing person, but I would ask, over everybody I asked, I'd say, so tell me about your school district. They tell me, then I'd say, tell me what you're most proud of, and then I'd turn that question around and say, what is the one thing that you're really good at? And they'd say, well, we have really good test scores, we have great performing arts, or our athletic team, or whatever their connection to it was. But nobody could really put their hand around and say, but we're the district that is killer for science, or we're the district that is killer for this or that or something like that. And I know you probably are at something. I don't know what that is exactly, because that wasn't my research, but it would be beneficial to the district in a marketing sense and just in a, I call it an elevator speech sense, that your administrators, people could say, we're the district that works with the company in town. We have one of the top internship programs in the country for biomedical science or something, whatever your things are. So that's just an observation. It's not something bad. It's common. Most school districts don't. So that's not like it's a, but as the district is in a marketable area, you have private schools, you have charter schools, you've got, if I remember correctly, Kalamazoo's accepting, is that correct? Kalamazoo has an open enrollment thing. So there's other districts around you that can take your students. So it's in your best interest to be able to articulate that and say, but we're the guys that do this or that or something like that. But to say we have good academics and good fine arts sounds good, but it's not uncommon to every good school district in the state. Not everybody has it, but a lot of people do. So what makes you different is the question I guess would take some research to look at. But it's a good question, and it's a positive question, not a bad one. Sorry, Mr. Superintendent, but one of the things is, as COVID's over, we need to get the superintendent and the cabinet members out into the community more. He knows that. I'm kidding with him, but we do think that the district would benefit if the key administrators would be out on the campuses, out in community more. Now that during COVID, everything just shut down, but it's definitely to the advantage. Face-to-face communication, just kind of just a mental health check. How's everybody doing? And the key to that is in a non-evaluative way, because as school administrators, and I worked in school district for years. Usually when you saw an administrator of the district, they were either doing a walkthrough or they were there to fix something or check something. But sometimes it doesn't hurt just to be there and just have a chat with the principal and see what's going on. Show me around, show me something you're proud of, those kind of things. And not just the superintendent, I'll put the pressure on him, but on central office people to get out into the campuses as their schedule permits. And I understand how that works. A couple other things, and we'll go forward here. The surveys and the conversations with staff, particularly the parents a little bit, showed a lack of trust in school district communications. I think what they meant by that, I don't think it was like we don't trust the people and we think they're bad. I think it was more a question of we don't really know whether this is accurate information or not. We're not getting the information in a timely manner. And so I think there needs to be a little bit of soul searching on what are we sending out, how quickly are we sending it out, and how is it being presented and what platforms and that kind of stuff. And we'll talk more about that, but that came from the surveys. And it doesn't mean that decisions are wrong, and it doesn't mean that all the communication is not adequate. What it means is that we're just not doing, we meaning you, the district, is not doing as good a job reaching those different audiences. If they feel that, that means something's not working. Just like in any relationship, all of a sudden it's like, this isn't working, but I'm not sure why, kind of thing. The Community Relations Department would benefit from a more strategic approach to communications. We've talked at length about that with Michelle already, but you can get, I've worked in the business for most of my career, you can spend all your time doing stuff, but then sometimes you're not working towards the bigger goal, you're just doing the stuff. I'm working on the teacher end of the year banquet, which has to be done. I'm working on retirement things, and I'm working on the video and things. But am I working on what the district's goals are and that kind of stuff? And so, and I'm not saying they're not, but what I'm saying is there needs to be a purpose to that, just like a classroom teacher needs to know what the outcome of a lesson is. The PR department needs to know what the outcome of a PR program is at the end of a year. Maybe not in a week, but over the course of time. And so there's some good strategies for that in here as well. And there's a need to evaluate the effectiveness of what, with that goes, what are we doing now? Are there things we're doing now that don't need to be done completely? Or to reevaluate what we're doing, maybe do it a different way? Because sometimes you can say, we want to do all these things, but we're already doing this. So it's a way to look at that. And then the other thing is there a need to evaluate it, the job descriptions. The current job descriptions, the staff is new this year. So I think a year with the current staff, the way things are, I think is great. Let everybody kind of get settled in. But over the course of the spring, start looking at maybe reevaluating those job descriptions and roles and responsibilities. I'm not suggesting adding staff, I'm just suggesting reevaluating what people are doing so that you can move into some new areas and have some space to do that. And maybe move some things out. So. And a couple of quick observations, and this is the last page for this. And then we did find there was a lack of print materials to support the school district's efforts. We were kind of looking for, you have a brochure if I'm a realtor and I'm an old school realtor and I walk in, I want a brochure or something like that. Do I have one? You have a newsletter. Do I have a fact sheet that you could give to every principal and have it in their back pocket so they know how many students and what the budget is and things like that? Event calendars. You're small enough where you could do an event calendar of some kind for the whole district, at least big events through the year, and have a nice calendar, printed calendar, things like that. So print materials are not dead yet. They're heading that way, but they're not quite there yet. So community relations needs, in my opinion, needs to start investing some time and resources into video. Video is something that big districts do all the time. Smaller districts really don't have the capacity or the staff for it. But video engagement is so high in social media and online. When people see video, they pop and people immediately are drawn to it. And I think for very little cost, even the cost of some equipment to go with a good quality iPhone. You can do some pretty good video these days, but they have some equipment, so that's something to look at. And then the last thing is social media platforms are managed well. You actually have some good social media platforms, but the strategic purpose of them kind of fits into what I said earlier. It's this there's stuff, for example, I'm not picking on you because this is just an example, but if your website, if your social media is completely pictures of recognition, here's your national merit kids, and these kids won the football, and these girls are going to state for something else, that's great. And we all like to see those things on Facebook, but none of them have to do with learning per se, and directly learning. There's no picture of a teacher in a classroom, there's no math teacher, there's nothing. It's always going to be the kids that win, and every year it's the same, because I did it myself. It's the same cycle of the kids to get the award, just different names. And so you can get caught in that, and sometimes you step back and say, but if our goal is, let's say science education is the district's big goal this year, then probably we need to be highlighting science education in some of our communications and our pictures, and or if diversity is our goal, then we want to, whatever our thing is, we want to make sure that even the little stuff like Instagram and Facebook and Twitter are hitting on those little buttons every now and then. You still do the other stuff, but you need to pay attention to that too. So that's the observations and everything else leading up to the recommendations. Do you want me to go through these then first? Just keep going? Sure.
Going.
Keep going.
Okay, so I'll try to go quickly through these. There's 9 recommendations, and I'm not going to read them all to you line for line. I think that would be redundant. But this talks about aligning strategic communications with district goals and objectives. You have school district goals, and the board and the administration set, and so to kind of lay those out literally on a board in communications and come up with ways that the communications department can strategize to help with this district and the goal in that way. Strategic communications plan looks like at all the activities and says which ones make a big difference, which ones are really just spinning wheels, and maybe we need to cut some off. We've already talked about that. There's that RPIE, what that stands for is research, planning, implementing, and evaluating. It's a PR thing, but it's how we evaluate stuff. The crisis communications plan, the district has a good crisis plan. I think it's tied in with the local first responders and everything else. But the communications department does not have their own, and the communications department needs its own crisis plan, not different from that one, and that's part of it. But in a crisis, and I'll use this as an example, we have a lot of disasters in Texas. It seems to be a theme. And so if you live in the Houston area, you get floods and tornadoes, or floods and hurricanes. And so here's a good example. A hurricane hit one of the school districts in Texas where my friend works, and he had no power, and he was locked, couldn't get to work for 3 or 4 days. So the day of the crisis, he had no way to communicate with the people he was working with because all the cell phones were down. But yet 3 schools were flooded, and the high schools were closed, and it was a mess. This is one from a couple years ago. So then PR guy number 2 had to be the person to go to the high school and deal with the media, because everybody, the national media was all over it, but the first guy couldn't even get in from Galveston, this kind of thing. So a crisis plan says if Michelle can't get in, then you do this and you do this. Or if there's an on-site incident, like let's say there's a gas leak in an elementary school, and you evacuate the elementary school, which happens. That's a news thing. Everybody likes that, to see all the kids outside, are they in danger, this kind of thing. Well, who goes to the school, who stays and answers the calls from panicked moms and dads, because that's going to happen. So you don't want everybody to go over there and then have nobody answering the phone. So a crisis plan says, in this situation you do this, in this situation you do this, and then God forbid if it's a terrible situation, you still have a plan, you know what to do if something bad happens and you're ready to roll. So that's what it is for a crisis communications plan. All right. We talked about that one there. One of the mentions I had there in the future, as the district grows and different space may become available, it would probably be beneficial to have the communications staff not working at the front desk of the school district. Right now, I don't think it's probably a practical solution, but in the future, I think that would be a good solution to be able to get more time on task. And then also probably some more formal evaluations of community relations staff. Everybody's evaluated, but there's not really a communications evaluation tool, and so it wouldn't hurt to create or use one from Ensborough. Our association has them, and use that to evaluate some of the things we're talking about. So, all right, second recommendation is internal communications. Internal communications, establishing internal communications, establishing expectations. Somehow or other, schools operate autonomously. And this is the way all school districts are, not yours. If things are going well, every school principal sees themselves as basically the superintendent of that school in a good way. And so it's kind of like, I got things covered, my kids are learning, there's no problems here. if you don't come over, that's fine, we got it under control kind of thing. And so you've got 12 of those or 20 of those, or how many schools you have or something like that. But they don't always operate and work together then as a team. It's more like, I'm good, you're good, and we'll all come to the meeting together and talk about it. Central office is constantly trying to break that out and to have people work more collaboratively. And so when we talk about internal communications, it's really important for central office to take a leadership role and to encourage everybody, not just the communications office, but everybody to work towards this goal, because it's an issue that came up that internal communications, especially with teachers and staff, needs to be changed, and the only way to do that is to get everybody working on the same page. The process for communicating key information, we mentioned that already, I won't go into that again. Keeping administrative assistants in the loop. I met with the administrative assistants. It was actually, we had a great meeting, and one of the things they said was their supervisors often go to meetings, come back and go straight into whatever the workday involves, and they basically won't know for hours what happened at that meeting, yet people start calling them about, are we going to close school tomorrow, are we going to do this or that, and so they were asking more, it would be nice if we kind of had an idea of what the agenda items are for the meetings, and then whatever's relevant to us, we'd be able to respond to, so I think that was a good observation by them. And face-to-face communications gets to the idea of people getting out onto the campuses more. I won't try to keep moving from that. And internal email, I had the opportunity to speak today with the administrative cabinet, and we talked a little bit about this, and the notion that one teacher could get emails from 3 or 4 or 5 different departments in central office in the same day, and of course they're teaching as well, so they're taking a break and they're looking, and here's something on this, this, and this, and if there's ways for departments to break that down, and even within the same department, and I'm not picking on curriculum, but they usually have a larger staff, they may be sending somebody out on ELA and someone else sending somebody out on a math workshop or something else, so these emails are coming in, but there's really not coordination to try to winnow that down a little bit. And so that was one of the suggestions, maybe start looking at how we communicate out. The, let me see what this, number 3. One of the things that we talked about is evaluating the current tools is when we talk about that is maybe, this goes back to the parent and family communications process, is maybe a committee of some kind, a select committee that involves teachers and some principals and inevitably the technology department, maybe more than community relations or both, to talk about are there things we can do to kind of cut down the number of platforms that the schools and teachers are using over the course of time. It's not something you can do like that. You can do it like that, but it doesn't go very well. But you can gradually do that. So I think that's important to look at, and it's a good positive thing to look at, and it would address the issue that the parents brought up. The, let me see, expanding the text messaging, what that is that a lot of parents, one of the preferred methods for getting important communications, that's the key, is important communications, was text messaging. But the school district doesn't use text messaging very much for that purpose. But they were saying, I don't mind getting a text message if it's for my kid's school and it says, don't forget to do this or that kind of stuff. It's what they don't want is fun fair, bring a can of food to the fun fair or whatever, and start getting those text messages because they start becoming numb to the good stuff. But using text messaging, the 2 questions we ask is how do you prefer to get information, and then how do you prefer to get emergency or critical information? Everybody said text messaging for that. The other one, people were all over the place, send me an email, call me, lots of different things, but the text messaging was pretty important to them. So I think that's probably worth looking at anyway, how the district does that. Engaging the public in conversations about their schools. This obviously has been going on for a while, but I think public schools around the country have been, it's a big issue. You go to school board's convention, there's going to be a workshop on this every hour of an entire convention on public engagement. And so it's a big issue. One of the things that I would encourage is to look at ways, and there's some suggestions in there, but look at ways that you can involve community and giving input and things, but also look at ways you can have discussions about education with the community. I think that's the key. Sometimes we tend to go out, and our engagement is to give them information, because we know they want information. Here's the bond election, here's the buildings we're going to build, we're going to close this school, we're going to repurpose it, or these kind of things. But we don't get out and just talk about education. We don't talk about learning. We don't talk about social, emotional learning or things like that. And you may, I don't mean to suggest you don't, but sometimes we get at that kind of situation, we get trapped in the information out, and maybe it would be beneficial to just have dialogue with parents and dialogue with the community, and that could be through Rotary. It could be, I went to your Rotary meeting while I was here, good large group of people, look like a lot of influential people in the community. And I'm sure school district's done a lot of presentations there. If it's like the Rotary Club I'm in, there's probably school people rolling through all the time. But rarely is there a conversation. It's more of a presentation kind of thing. And that maybe there's ways to break that down a little bit. And And if you're going to do that kind of thing, one of the things that can happen too is if the district's approaching a certain issue, maybe it's finance might be a good one to look at, or some other issues, the school board can certainly get behind that and help with that and help promote that, because you represent the community in a sense. You have a lot of influence in the community. And if you have, if you're using social media and other things of your own, you can tell people and say, this is kind of something that's important. You might want to come to this, and kind of add a different spin to something rather than just something on the school district website that says come to a meeting or something like that. So I think that'd be beneficial. I did talk to students. The students were very interesting to talk to. If you want to know, they prefer TikTok. So if you don't have TikTok accounts, you want to go out and get a TikTok account if you want to talk to your teenagers, because of the entire group, I said, how many people in here have Facebook? And one of them did, because his mom made him have a Facebook account, but he never uses it. He's proud to say, I never actually use it, but I have a Facebook account. But everybody else said, if you want to get word out in the high school, maybe Twitter, but in reality, TikTok. So, that we smile at that as, quote, grown-ups. But in reality, if that's the way they're communicating, do we need to communicate with kids on that platform in some way? There's a place for that. I don't know. If we started communicating too much, they just move to something else. That's how kids are. I have 2 kids of my own. I know how that works. Social media and video, like I said, I think the school district does a good job with that. So I'm not going to hit on that too much. One of the areas that's a little bit weak is when you get to the lower tier of social media platforms and stuff, there's a lot of unattended houses, so to speak. So Facebook, you've got a Facebook account for the district, maybe a campus has a Facebook, but you go to campus and find out on their Facebook account that it has the Halloween party on it. And nobody's actually done anything since Halloween, since October for that platform. Or worse than that, you get lower than that, and there's teachers' pages, which they may have used in August, like welcome back to school, and then it hasn't been touched since welcome back to school. Now, I'm not picking on those people. What I'm saying, though, is those accounts should either be shut off, turned off if they're not being used, or updated, or have very generic information, like just name, rank, serial number kind of thing on there, so if somebody goes there. But it leaves an impression on a parent or a new person when they come there and find something that's 3 or 4 months old, like who's doing this? And so it's very hard for the communications department to track hundreds and hundreds of social media sites, but as they get down to lower in the campuses, somebody needs to be looking at those things and start saying, are there things that are in there? There's nothing inappropriate there now, but I found a lot of dead space as we got lower in the whole thing. We talked a little bit about video, so I won't go on with that. And marketing, defining the brand, that's kind of what we said, a brand. The whole idea being, what is the school district known for? What is what is our one thing? Remember Billy Crystal? The one thing. What is your one thing? So I think that's something, that's not something you need to do next weekend. That's something you could look at in the long term, but it would be a good exercise for you. You could get a facilitator, you could do it yourselves, and just try to nail that down a little bit and tie some of your marketing expertise into that rather than just doing things because it's your 150th anniversary, for example, or something like that. Really nail it down. The District Extra newsletter is a good newsletter. One of the things I found in talking to parents, or there are people that don't get it, because they live, I may get this wrong, they live in the county but outside the city of Portage. So the Portage city people get it because it's tied to the city thing, but the people outside of that space don't get it. So that's probably a concern if you're sending communications out. And I know it's available to them, but it's probably something that needs to be addressed. Or the school district takes it on themselves and just says, we're going to mail this to every one of our own patrons, which of course, I'm assuming would be additional cost because you're piggybacking on the city one right now. But it also might be an advantage to you too to do that in the sense of having your own identity instead of you're part of the city every now and then. It's like, this is our communication. This is something that you could look at that. I'm not saying it should be done. Real estate agent outreach, I think you need to, not you, but I think the district could probably do a better job in packaging and preparing information for realtors who are selling in this area. We know realtors aren't supposed to tell people where to live, and they're very good at that kind of thing, but I guarantee you they get information from a lot of different sources about schools, and rather than tell people what to do, they share that information with the parents. And so if I'm totally new to this area and I walk in, and I'm handed a whole packet of material from Kalamazoo schools about something or other, and then I have just a one sheet here. I don't know enough about you. I'm probably not going to come here and drive the community. I'm making some quick decisions. So I think that's important, something to consider. And then the other part of that too is when you get people moving in, there are sites, and you're probably familiar with them, but if you've heard of Great Schools or Niche, and we're always proud when we get ranked high. I remember we'd always make a big deal like we're one of the top schools in the state in Niche or something like that. But people use those. Online is not that uncommon anymore. So if I'm moving here from out of state, I'm going to go to those sites. I'm going to rate, and and I'll make a decision on what school to send my child to in this district based on that information. The catch is, though, that information is coming from totally unreliable sources. If 6 parents are angry with X elementary school and wrote on this is a terrible place and the principal's mean and whatever, I'm going to just go right over it because I'll just trust that it's a trusted source of information. And because those are third-party based. Now, there's research in it, but all the comments are third-party based. Basically, put what you want up there. My advice to that is track those, have your communications track those and keep an eye on those and what they are. You can take ownership of those as an owner, they call it, and track them, and it's actually a good thing to do. We talked a little bit about the non-English speaking families, and there's a woman named Teresa. Teresa's last name is? Fortin. They asked for 2 more Teresa Fortins. They said if we had 3 Teresa Fortins, we wouldn't need anything else. I don't know what that means. I think that was a good thing. But no, they just loved her. And I'd say that because I just thought it was such a funny comment. Can you just get 2 more Teresas is what they said. So I said I would share that with the board. So there you go. Tell Teresa I said hello. The Board of Education, we had this conversation earlier, when I was here last time at the last board meeting, about what are some things that the board can do or get involved in. And a couple of things is the board is not very visible on the district website and social media. And I don't mean you should be doing that. I'm talking about the district. And so I think there's some strategies on showing the board doing something other than attending meetings. A lot of people think, well, they go to board meetings and that's it. But you do so many other things. You probably go to athletic events. You probably go to plays. You do those kind of things. But you're also involved in a lot of other things. And so I think more attention, if you go to Board of Trustees on the website and look at it, it's a picture of the schedule of board meetings. So of course that's what you're going to assume, that's what people do. But I think that's something that can be looked at and improved upon, because for the work you do, I think the recognition might come from that. Something that the board has an interest in, I know, and certainly should look at is ways to interact with the community. Some of the things I talked about were things the district would do, but there are other opportunities for the board to have where they can get into conversations at a higher level about things, board policy and things, maybe bigger things you're looking at changing, or you know, as we look to the future, things like that, because there's a lot going on there. So there's a lot of different opportunities. Those recommendations are in there, suggestions. I won't go through those. The last thing I want to mention on the board, though, is the Board Academy. That's something we mentioned last time. I worked in a school district that sponsored a Board Academy for over 20 years. And the Board Academy, if you had interest in it, we have new school board members here, so imagine this as a potential new school board member. The Board Academy is always held in January in Texas. In our district, the board filing date is in February, so a month before the filing date. And basically it's a half day on a Saturday morning, and anybody that had interest in, you don't have to run for the board, but anybody that had interest in running for the board or just went interested in knowing what's going on in the school board, attend this, and we would literally go through everything. Like, here's your Finance 101, here's how curriculum works, here's how campuses are built, and then the board president would explain what the role of a board member is, and then what the real-time responsibility is to that, because people sometimes don't realize those things. And then they would graduate from the Board Academy, and after about 2 or 3 years, it became an expectation. If you're going to run for the board, you better go to the Board Academy. And now pretty much anybody that runs for board will say, I was in the Board Academy 6 or Board Academy 7 or something like that. That doesn't mean they're not required to, but the community kind of became kind of an expectation. So you might want to look at something like that. It's not as much work as it sounds. For you, it's work for them. I'm sorry. But it is a very effective program, and it's a great opportunity for the board to get in front of people who might want to be board members. And some people say, I don't think I want to do this after all, or yeah, I'm all in. And then before they run, they're a little bit more educated. So when they do their campaigning, they've got a little bit more information than they would normally have, or they put these things together themselves. We also have a leadership program, like leadership. You probably have a Chamber of Commerce or something leadership program in there, and the school district has a leadership program as well. That might be something you want to look at. So those are all the recommendations. Then we do a benchmarking against the national best practices and rank the different areas, communications, internal, external, that kind of thing. Established, emerging, and exemplary. None of those are marked exemplary, only because I'm a college teacher and I can't mark anything exemplary. I apologize for that. I probably should have. But but those are areas that, based on all the information we had, but those are constantly changing. And then, you know, it's a team effort. One of the things that I really want to stress, there's a couple things before we close, is communications sounds like it's community relations, but it really is a department. It's more than a department. It's all the administrators, and it's the board, it's the superintendent. Everybody represents the communications effort of the district. The leadership from that should come from community relations, but they're basically not responsible for all of it, I guess what I'm saying. The recommendations you see before you could be taken, soon, or they could take over a period of years. there's no expectation at all that this should be done, like, okay, let's get working on this, see if we get it done by June or whatever. You've got a presentation coming up, so I won't steal any more thunder from that. But I do want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. I think that the National School Public Relations Association also thanks you, and on behalf of them, for the opportunity to do this audit. It took a little while to get here, and I'm really happy to present, and I'd be glad to answer any questions from there. Sorry it took a little longer than I expected, but lots of pages. Questions?
Tim?
Yes, sir.
The points of pride for the district, I didn't see anything about facilities in there. Did that come up at all?
Points of pride, facilities meaning?
The new facilities.
Oh, saying we like facilities.
Did that come up at all?
No, it did not. No, wasn't, no. That doesn't mean that, maybe the first thing off their head wasn't that. First thing off their head was something else. So.
Right. And for those people who are receiving the Portage or in the district extra, were their comments about it were what?
Positive, or it was useful. I don't think it ranked the highest. I think what I wasn't asking people to rate it as much as how do you rely on, where do you get your school information from? And so that was ranked in there. It's in there somewhere, but it wasn't ranked number one. They get most of their information online, like we do. We all do the same thing. But a lot of them said, I get my information from my school, from my child's school. The parents did. Now, if you're not a parent, if you're retired or you're young and you don't have a kid in school, most of your information in the schools is not coming from the media anymore. That's what's changed a lot. In the old days, the old format, when I worked in South Bend, South Bend Tribune would have an education section, and you could always read about the schools and everything, but that's just about gone. And so now you have to rely on your own media, what you're producing, or unfortunately, people that aren't really media people, just people that just want to post stuff. And so you've got to kind of be careful in that sense. So, but to answer your question, there's nothing bad about the newsletter at all. Just some people said, I don't get it, because we'd ask them how they rely on it, and they're like, what is this? Or I don't get this, or something like that. So.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for Tim?
Not so much a question as a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much for the education that you just provided.
It's my pleasure. I'm pretty passionate about this stuff, so I appreciate
The
it.
depth in here, as I was looking through, I'm going to enjoy that. Thank you.
Good. We really don't want to just give you a bunch of advice and just say, good luck with that. We really want to give you the answers too. So the report is a lot thicker than what I just told you, because we do want to help as well. So.
As you went through your PowerPoint and I was following along and here instead, excellent, excellent.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
One thing that's really awesome about this process is that it's really not taken from a punitive standpoint as much as a coaching standpoint. And so we've talked all along about what, so none of this is a surprise to any of us. And so so we've already taken some steps here. And so just we wanted to real briefly, first of all, I wanted to introduce you to my new team. We had the opportunity after COVID to hire an entire new team. So we have Kayla Miller, who, to those of you who've been on the board a while, she's not a stranger. You've seen her at these meetings before because she was the MLive education reporter. So, and then Terry Reed, who joined our team this fall. She showed up at a hiring event, and just it all just came together very well. And she's the smiling face you see when you first come into the building, or if you call the front desk. So Kayla's the communications coordinator, Terry's the assistant. One of the things that did come out, so like I said, we were going to wait for tonight to start taking some of the actions. There's the way the report is set up, as you'll see, is there's some quick wins, and so I wanted to kind of let you know what we've done so far as the result of meeting with Tim when he was here prior to the audit report. Some of the quick wins that we're going to undertake right away, and then what we're going to be doing as far as our next steps. So social media is one of the things that we bringing Kayla on board certainly had, she did a lot of that work with MLive and stuff, and so I want to bring her up and have her just run through some of the social media successes that we've had and how we're building that following, and then we'll get into some of the other things. So.
Good evening, Superintendent Beeling and Board of Education. So yes, like Michelle said, I want to talk to you a little bit about social media and some of the work that we've done since Tim's visit in October. So our district social media presence has grown significantly over the last 6 months. And the graph ahead of you here shows our Facebook and our Instagram reach, and reach is defined by the number of people that see something on Facebook or Instagram. So the blue is Facebook and the red is Instagram, and that kind of shows you month to month. I go in and I track that, how many eyes are on our posts and how many people are we potentially reaching on Facebook. So one point of pride I wanted to mention, in the last 90 days, 50,000 people have been reached on our Facebook page. And so those are all people that within our community as well as outside of our community. We also track the number of people following our social media pages, and so that in the last few months we've added more than 200 followers on Facebook and another 100 on Instagram. So something we implemented was Throwback Thursday, which is a common phrase you probably have heard. So what I did was I took pictures from some of the yearbooks that we have at the administration office, and I try to put cute, engaging comments on there to engage with our community. And so in this example, I asked what song this student from 1997 was dancing to, and received lots of fun guesses from our community. And so what you see here is reach, and that's how many people saw it, and then engagement is how many likes, shares, and comments on Facebook. So another example was how old is this computer from Portage Central High School? And so people got to take their guesses as to how old that was. So that was a fun one. We also use our social media to promote the great things that our students and our staff are doing in our buildings. And so in this example, this is Isaac Dunn. He's a work-based learning student, and that's a partnership that our district has with local organizations to bring our students and give them real-world work-based learning experience. So this example, this reached over 8,500 people on Facebook, and there were hundreds of comments from people engaging in that. Another example, this is students from Woodland, KPS, Woodland, that pairs older students with younger students. So just getting to show kids' faces on Facebook, this reached over 4,000 people and had 172 likes, comments, and shares on Facebook. The last example I have for you is actually a retired secretary. This is Vivian McCowan. She turned 100 years old. She lives over at Heritage here in Kalamazoo, and she used to be a secretary. And so we promoted her on social media, District Extra newsletter, and the post on Facebook reached more than 6,500 people and had 578 engagement score. Another action to date, this goes beyond social media, but is printed materials. So as Tim mentioned, we didn't really have a brochure or good relocation guide for Jakeway realtors or any other realtor in the area, so you have copies of that here at your table. So I designed a trifold brochure that pulled some of the same information from our district profile, and as well as a larger relocation guide, which is a lot of the same material, but it's just a larger guide to fit into the Jakeway relocation guide. So these printed materials really allow us to market ourselves. I actually handed a brochure to an incoming kindergarten mom this morning. She said, hey, I want to enroll, and I handed her the brochure. So it's really good to have that to give to people. We also, this spring, will be launching some new kindergarten and young fives enrollment marketing materials. So I created 3 one-minute videos, and that screenshot is from a lovely little kid in the Young Fives classroom using magnifying glass. And we'll launch those on our website and on social media in February. And I also printed some posters, designed and printed some posters that went out to daycares, preschools, and pediatricians in the area to promote our school's kindergarten and young fives. And all of that was made possible with some updated office equipment. So I am able to go in and take better pictures and video of kids and use those marketing materials on our website and social media. So that is the end of my portion of this presentation. So I will hand it back over to Michelle. Thank you.
So we did want to take those kind of immediate actions. Here's some other things that are in the report, and you'll see if you can kind of dig into it because there is a lot to absorb there. Really working on we had a process kind of from a crisis communication standard prior to COVID, and of course habits go away, lists get outdated. So we're working on updating that process for keeping administrative assistants informed. For instance, if one school goes into a lockup for whatever reason, we want to make sure all the other schools know that. So that they're not caught off guard. So, and we'll be looking at some of those things like how do we text, how do we update kind of that communications process. There's some very specific recommendations for the district memo, which is our internal communication, our staff newsletter. So we're going to be working on making those right away. Those are kind of quick, easy things to do. Looking at the district extra and how we can get those items out to people that don't receive it. We've taken some steps, but obviously it's not enough. You can find the district extra on the website. We do send some out to some of the schools that have the neighborhoods, but we'll definitely look at some of those recommendations as well. And then evaluating website options. One of the things, our website in there is 6 years old, and so at least 6 years old. And so technology changes, and we want to be able to look at that and how that might even integrate with some of our communications. And then kind of our next steps after that, we're definitely going to look at how we can carve out some time. Like Tim said, we're all at the front desk as well, so that it makes it very difficult sometimes for us to get away. But as we're going to take some opportunities during breaks or over the summer to be able to do that, we'll definitely work on updating our job descriptions. Now that Kayla and Terry are here, we definitely have shifted some things around. Take a look at that cascading communication and refining that process to make sure that it is logical, that we're leaving enough time for the teachers to find out before we roll it out to the parents. And so again, all of the things we've kind of done, and it's more of like how do we continue to refine that, improve it, take a look at it. And then also engaging with you so that we can look at how we can continue to enhance the communication about what the board is doing and how you're engaged. Again, some of the same things that Tim said. So that's really where we are right now. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you have any other ones for Tim. Yeah, he's still here. I know he's going to try and sneak out and drive back to South Bend. But other than that, we'll, yeah. All right.
We all appreciate the audit, we really do.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. I think it's going to have a really positive impact. And like I said, you love to hear that you're doing everything wonderfully, and it's great. But that's not really how you learn and grow, right? It's by knowing the ways that you can improve. And so again, it's very much. I'm very excited about what we have here, and there's a lot there, and it's going to take a long time to do it. But that's where the strategic planning will come in to kind of stage that and see where can we have those quick wins and then that significant impact longer term. So.
It speaks to continuous improvement here and how it's part of the culture, and it's okay to say, we got to get better in a certain area, and you're not going to get better unless you bring it forward.
Exactly. Yeah, we talk about it all the time with students, so I think we should apply it to ourselves as well. So. All right.
Thank you.
Are you ready to go into topic number 2? Continuous improvement.
Yes.
So we're taking advantage of the people who are able to join us this evening. And Tim flew up from Texas to be with us. And aside from that, we're also in the middle of, we just completed day 1 of 2 days of our Leadership Development Institutes. And those have been facilitated for the last 6 or 7 years now by Dr. K.K. Owen, and so she's here, and it happens to coincide with the board meeting date, so we just, out of a matter of good timing and fortune, we're able to give you a little update about what we're doing with continuous improvement for our new board members. I gave you a little bit of insight on this back in December on some of our efforts. KK is going to kind of review that from her perspective of what kind of work she's been doing with the district. So. KK. We call her KK. It's Dr. Karen Owen, but is what she goes by, and I'll refer to you as KK if you don't mind.
Please call me KK. Good evening. It's great to be here and be back with you. It's nice to see new faces, and thank you to the board members and to the superintendent for continuing the partnership with us and continuing this really, really important work. What we've been working on over the years of the Continuous Improvement Partnership is really improving a system. It's different than an improvement project. You find a gap and you work on a thing, a project, a process. But this work is bigger than that. When you think about how do you improve a system, you fix something, you spread that and scale that, and next thing you know, you have systems that are improving. And that's really what this work is about. These are the 9 principles. We call them the foundational beliefs, and it's really what high-performing organizations know how to do and do consistently. So high-performing leaders in high-performing organizations know how to take actions aligned to each one of these really, really important pieces of the work. And you see some that we've talked about in the past. Build a culture around service. Just today, we did 2 sessions of service excellence work with people from the schools. Focus on employee engagement. We are measuring that and working on that all the time. Measuring the important things. Communicate at all levels. We've heard a good bit about that tonight. So if we know where to focus and we know behaviors and processes attached to these, now we're improving an entire system. So what does that look like to improve a system? First of all, you've really got to have an image of the future that people can wrap their heads around, that makes sense to people, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. You have to measure. You have to put in place very specific actions and measure the results of those actions. And one of the problems that lots of organizations run into is they're doing way too many things. They're focused on everything, and then they're focused on nothing. One of the really, really important pieces here in Portage is this part right here, those employee, student, and parent experiences. What's the perception of students who go to our schools? What are the perceptions of employees? What do people out in the schools and the departments think of the services that they're getting from each other? That's a critical piece, those stakeholder measurements of perceptions. We take action on those. When you add that together, it's taking that academic improvement work and putting it alongside culture work and service work. Now we have a system that is improving. If you look underneath that kind of framework, there are lots of leader habits. We've worked for several years on building these consistent leadership behaviors, actions, and habits. What are leaders doing every day that add up to an improving system? You see some of those here, leader rounding, department rounding. And once again, you see those important pieces. That stakeholder survey, are we listening to the people who are utilizing the services within our system here? It's one thing to measure, and that's important to do. It's another thing to say, here are the results. So that's a consistent leader habit, to not just measure employee engagement, but to roll out those results to the employees. This is what you guys said, and now as leaders, we're going to take action to improve your perception of your workplace. So that's some of the ongoing work. This is a pretty basic model. This is Tony Reich's model from the Carnegie Foundation. But you kind of have to have a system and a cycle of improvement. You see some important questions there at the top. What's the problem? What are we trying to solve? What do we want to accomplish? And then figuring out, how will we know it gets better? Every change is not improvement. So we have to know and be able to measure whether or not a change in action really leads to improvement. So you see the Plan, Do, Study, Act, a pretty common continuous improvement model. We uncover something in a stakeholder survey, we make a plan to improve it, we do those actions, and then we study the results. Is it better? Is it an improvement or not? And then we tweak those actions. Stop doing things, start doing things, adjust what we're doing. But you can't do that just once. You have to do it over and over and over, and those iterations improve a system. This is a really important part of the work that we've been working on for almost 2 years. Is that right? Almost 2 years? And you may remember last year we had the first district values team, DVT, and they proceeded to build out, with lots and lots of input, 3 really critical elements that were aligned to the 100th anniversary. That identity affirmation statement, the equity definition, and the selection of these 6 values that students, parents, employees, community members all weighed in on. What are the things that matter to us that we want to do every day within Portage Public Schools. So the new work is District Values Team 2.0 that's working now in building out definitions and specific actions. What can we observe that let us know these values are in place in our schools? So we've just begun that work. We started in November. We had a virtual meeting last week. We're having a live meeting with that team tomorrow. Interestingly enough, it started with the students. Just like the last work did. That student voice is such a critical piece. And Mr. Beelang has been pretty adamant about that from the beginning. If we want to know what's happening, let's ask the kids. That's really correct. So this process started with students taking each one of the values and saying, what does that look like to us as students? You see their list there for accountability, and then you see the employee list. The adults on that team did the same thing. We've done that for all 6 of the values. Now we're in the prioritization phase, and so you can see there, what are the top 5 ideas for this particular definition and set of actions? Here's another one, compassion. Don't worry, we're not going to go through all 6. And again, you see the student responses. What does it look like to them? The employee responses. And we started last week, and we'll continue that tomorrow, pulling the most popular ideas, the things that are most meaningful to most people. And from that, we'll build the definitions and the specific actions that go along with each one of the values. If we can't see it, then we don't know if it's happening or not. So the need for specific actions aligned to what we say are our values, really, really important. So this is that overall framework. You've probably seen this before in other times when I've come to present to you. And you see here a pretty simplified version of what this looks like as it rolls along over time. And what we want to focus on tonight a little bit is that first one, define success. Remember that first chart that said you got to be able to flesh out a meaningful picture of the future that people can hang on to. So we want to share that with you tonight, and Mr. Beelang really wants to share that with you. So I will stand aside and
you can stand there. I'm going to work from over here.
Oh, okay.
As has been alluded to, we've been working on a lot of things over the years. We've been working on things for school improvement. The reports that I've been presenting to the board at the end of the school year on my goals and objectives have been formatted around the pillars that we work on. And so all this work, we've been trying to figure out how do we capture this in a simple one-page document. And that's where this whole idea of this plan, for lack of a better word yet, we're still working on branding this, but we've reduced our planning to one page, a one-page document that we can share with you as a board, with our community, with our staff, and with our students. And so let me just go through the elements that are on here and how they fit together. So it starts at the top with the board's vision. So this is the vision, and I know those that are probably watching remotely and sitting here, but our vision is to be an exceptional, continuously improving learning culture committed to all. That was the board's vision. The board created that vision probably 7 or 8 years ago, 9 years ago now, but it was one of the first things that happened shortly after I arrived where the board was really thoughtful about what do we aspire to be? And so over the long term. So that's the statement that we've been using throughout the district as we work with our various teams and organizations. So KK mentioned the formation of the district values team. There were 3 things that they were responsible for, and they're all up here on the chart. The first one is and it was in conjunction with celebrating our 100th year anniversary, we said, what can we do to begin to unify the district? I mean, we have 2 campuses for our secondary schools. They're very competitive. We have 8 elementary schools, 3 middle schools that you know, operate very well, but we've never worked together in unison. And so what are those things that we can do to help bring us together? So there were 3 things that came out of that discussion. One was the values that KK has already talked about. The other was, what do we aspire to be as we begin our second 100 years of existence? So this is a statement that's intended to help bring about the board's vision. And we're inspired to be a community grounded in fostering strengths, growth, and lifelong learning, every student, every future. So we want to make sure that that we understand who the kids are that we're serving, what their needs are, what their strengths are, and what is it that they aspire to be after they leave Portage Public Schools. So that was it's been referred to as our declaration statement, our aspirational statement, inspirational statement, whatever you want to call that. It's designed to be feeding into the board's vision. The third element after these two was our commitment to equity. As we were having discussions around equity, people had different ideas of what that meant. So we used the process that through the district values team that included surveys of parents, surveys of community members, students, and staff. We had rollout sessions of that throughout the last 16 months or so, where we got face-to-face feedback from folks. And then we assembled, as a subset of our district values team, a writing committee that processed all the information we received and landed on this. This is PPS's definition of equity. Portage Public Schools is an inclusive environment providing each individual access to resources and opportunities for success. That's the lens that we want to use as we talk about equity for our students. So those three elements, and then sandwiched in between there is the standards of service excellence. This is one of the first things we worked on as a district when we started working with student education. Is when we provide service, it started with central office, because central office provides service out to our buildings. What is it that, how do we want to treat the customers we serve? We came up, and again, we use people from out that serve other individuals. We use their secretaries, frontline contacts at our buildings to help create these standards of service excellence. And there's 5 of them here. Provide service with respect, act with integrity, own the interaction, communicate clearly, and be part of the team. Each one of these has backup information and has more detail about what they mean. And we just most recently revisited this and made a few revisions based on practice for the last few years. And so this is the latest iteration of that. And I'll explain why it's located here. But as you circle back, at the center of this chart and central to everything we do is how we organize all of our efforts. They're organized around 4 pillars, with student success being first, people and culture, which deals with our organization, the people that work within our organization, service excellence, how we serve our customers, our parents, our students, our staff, service. And then the last pillar, and you'll notice this is, if you remember some of the final report that I give every year, we added this 4th pillar of stewardship, knowing that we get a lot of resources. We've had a community that's been very generous in supporting us, our facilities, operationally through the enhanced millage, millage enhancements, and our special ed millage countywide. So we have a lot of support. We feel responsible to use those resources responsibly. And so we felt that was important enough to create its own pillar. So all of the work that we do, we bundle into one of these pillars. So this is the district level look at this. Let me get back. I was going to say the standards of service excellence really connects most closely with service providers and to stewardship, because that's where most of our interaction with the community takes place. So that's why that's located here. The way it overlaps these two. Each one of these pillars and a lot of this other information that's on here has backup material. So if you dig more deeply, you'll find out how this works at the school level. So all of our schools' continuous improvement plans are aligned to these 4 pillars, primarily around student success and people and culture. They'll have as each building develops their continuous improvement plan, they will set goals in most of these areas, some in some and some in others, but for sure, their student success and what they're doing to improve their culture within their buildings. And then they'll be sharing this information out with their parents, with their students, with their staff, outside of the smaller teams that are working on those initiatives. We're doing the same thing with each of our departments in central office and creating action plans, goals, I guess I should reverse that, goals, action plans, and then a monitoring system for all that we're doing with a lot more detail behind what's up here now. So we're launching this information tonight with the board. Later this week, we'll be sharing this with staff and with the community. It'll be on our website. And then this poster will be, we have posters for each of our buildings. So this will be posted throughout the district and the administration buildings. So we can explain what we're doing, how we're organized, the things that are important to us. And we've also created these little cards that we'll be distributing. I'll give you guys will have first for this. So these are just kind of a snapshot of that you can use as you're speaking to folks out in the community. That kind of captures most of this. And KK, what did I miss?
You did very well, Mr. Belang.
I was like, I'm speed talking.
You did very well. This level of work is really what high-performing organizations do. People who are already pretty good, they pretty much stand on status quo. But people who are continuously improving look to do work like this. This is a confidence builder. This is a way for people throughout this community to say, I know what they're about. And I know how I fit into that. For employees, they can find themselves in there. It really reduces anxiety. It's pretty transparent. And it was a pretty intensive process to get here to make sure that it was right and that it really did represent all those perceptions and what people need and want from Portage Public Schools. I remember, because this number will be in my head forever, the equity definition, that one piece alone on the first survey we did got over 1,600 recommendations of what should be in what you see in that green box. And it takes a lot of work to get down to what is the right thing to put in the green box. So we're there now. And this is continuous improvement work at a pretty high level. Now we have to make it come true. Now we have to live it. So an example of that is what you see on the bottom, those values. Once we get the definitions and the actions built out, we should be able to see accountability in action. We should be able to see respect in action and know what it is and know what it is not. And then in the words of the kids, and so how are we going to hold each other accountable for this? Wasn't that one of their first statements?
I did kind of a soft rollout with my student advisory board. And that was one of the things they looked at, these values, is what happens if we don't see this in action or someone is violating this? And it was like, we've got to figure out a way to make sure that we communicate to the people that can do something about that. And so they're already thinking ahead of, there's going to be times when we see things that aren't right, and or the opposite end. When we see someone doing what they should be doing, how do we recognize that and make sure others know about it?
Exactly.
But yeah, students are, the engagement we've had with students around this has been fantastic. I mean, they're very insightful, not afraid to speak their mind, and are pretty darn good at being accurate in what they're seeing and communicating.
They are. They really are. So this is a big step, and I think it's been well done with lots and lots of input, and we'll continue. We'll get back to work on it starting tomorrow. So when you are planful, intentional, with leader habits, with what are our standards of service excellence? What are our values? How do we define equity? All of this will drive the decisions that are made every day. That leads to improvement. Now we're building a system of continuous improvement by making good decisions based on what we've built out and align our work to. Thank you for giving me the time to be with you for a few minutes tonight and give you this update. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, may I ask a question?
Go right ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you. And getting to this point is not easy. And so kudos for sticking with it. My question for you, KK, but Mark chime in too. You've been working with us for a few years. Would you reflect back and then reflect forward and just name a few of the key kind of milestones kind of in our journey from your mind that we've gotten to? And this is going to be one of them, I'm sure. But are there a couple kind of big moments? And then reflect forward. I'm not going to make you commit this in ink, but what might we be able to expect as some significant milestones in the next year or two?
It's a really good question. And I think the first thing that comes to mind is the first time I met all the leaders here and we first began to look at and talk about what is continuous improvement, what are leader habits, what is a framework, an execution framework for these processes, which was pretty new to most of the people on that team. And they dug in. I mean, right away, we started, and one of the biggest, and still is to this day, one of the most powerful practices that has become a leader habit is rounding. Leader rounding on employees. When that becomes a part of your culture, that is an expectation, that's big. It makes people want to work for this organization. It makes leaders want to be in this organization. And then when we grew a little bit and we started stakeholder surveys, a lot of that responsibility falls on leaders again. That's why leader development is such a critical piece. They have to take their results, analyze them, roll them out to everybody, and that's being vulnerable and transparent in front of your people. Here's what you said about my leadership and where I'm doing well as your leader and where I have opportunity for improve. And now, by the way, can you give me some suggestions for what that improvement looks like? And we graduated from there to the parent and student surveys where now whole faculties talk about this is what the parents said we're doing well and what they'd like to see us improve. What can we do about that? So being able to take ownership just a step at a time. The whole piece about service excellence, how we built the standards with full participation, just like this was done. A lot of ownership there. A big team of people worked on that. And learning those service excellence kind of must-haves, always behaviors, one at a time. From the 5-10 rule to the 60-second greeting, AIAE and AIDIT, and all the way up. And we actually did a self-assessment today with 2 different groups of service providers because we have to reflect. Where are we? So I can see huge growth. I think going forward, and I'll be quiet here in a minute, Mark, let you take that. But I think one of the things that we heard in the presentation around communications, there's a culture shift that has occurred here where people are not afraid to be transparent. Leaders are not afraid to be vulnerable. And they are learning leaders. We learn new stuff every time. Tomorrow we're going to be doing a really important piece that's part of the future. How do you analyze the comments that you get on your surveys? Some of those are painful because people are they're honest. And that's a pain point for leaders. You get stuck on that negative comment, you can't see anything else. So we're going to begin that work tomorrow. How do you keep that in perspective, take the emotion out, and really look at what people are saying and what's behind that? What could have driven someone to make that comment? What were they really trying to say to us? So that's some of the work I see in the future is clinging to this because this is that sticky piece. A meaningful vision of the future that's sticky, that people can attach to. What would you add, sir?
Well, I probably shouldn't say anything after what you said, but I think the biggest challenge is making sure that the tactics that we've learned, the skills that we've learned, become part of the culture and happen consistently throughout the district. I mean, I think one of the toughest jobs that exist in a school district are at the building level leaders because they're caught between us and I shouldn't say it in this way as us, but it's between central office on one side and teaching staff on the other and trying to effectively navigate that. And that's a tough position to be in. And that's where a lot of these practices have to really take root in order to be part of our culture. So making sure that happens consistently across the district is probably one of our biggest challenges moving forward to if we really want to address the culture. You know, it's not, doing the surveys, for example, is one thing, as you've heard, but then doing something with that information in a thoughtful and organized manner is probably more important than the survey itself, especially if it's going to be sustained over time. So that's how my added
People are
comment.
taking bold steps. One of the things, we're gonna do the district services survey. It'll launch very soon, that annual survey. But we've been talking about this for a long time, and this has been driven by the departments to really expand who takes that survey. In a lot of school districts, it's the principals and the assistant principals. That's it. Departments serve schools, and these are the people taking the survey. And then people said, well, what about secretaries? They interact with maintenance, transportation, add a team, activity directors, athletic directors. Now we've expanded it to, it's everybody in all departments, because these people said, you know what, we serve each other. Let's all give each other feedback department to department. So I would say, I think Portage is going to have the most employees participating in the district services survey that I've ever seen. No one has ever, to my knowledge, in one of our partner districts said, let's everybody take it. Let's let all the employees in the departments. We want the feedback from each other. So remarkable things are happening.
And we're trying to get our participation rates back up again. You know, I think parents got over-surveyed during COVID. A lot of, you come home from the grocery store and you're getting a survey. So we're trying to find out how do we strategize to get participation rates back up so our data is more reliable from them. So that's a short-term challenge that we're already working on and getting more students and staff and parents to participate in surveys. Thank you.
I like what you said about meshing the communication at different levels and how that correlates exactly with what Mr. Carroll shared. It seems like both of these go so hand in hand. Thank you.
There is a lot of overlap. I mean, with communications and challenges there and the processes that are used there with the process we're using here. We're trying to keep the work so it's not separate work, but it's part of the work.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your service to the district. We appreciate it. Good to see you. Thank you.
Very nice to see you. Glad to be here.
Okay, we'll move to our comments and communications section. And I'll let Terry read our guidelines for public participation.
Public comment at board meetings. The board welcomes community input at our board meetings and recognizes the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on district matters. To permit fair and orderly public expression, please conform to these guidelines when addressing the board. Attendees must register their intention to speak during the public participation portion of the meeting by completing the speaker registration form at the beginning of the meeting. Individuals may not register others to speak. Speakers will be recognized by the presiding officer and may not be called in the order in which they have signed up to speak. Speakers are requested to state their name, address, and group affiliation if applicable. Limit comments to 3 minutes. Direct all comments to the board and not to staff or to other participants. Speakers may not yield any of their speaking time to others. Provide a written copy of your comments and supporting documentation to the board secretary if available. Present your comments in a respectful and professional manner to model the behavior expected of Portage students. Refrain from mentioning any student by name. Contact the superintendent directly regarding personnel matters. Board of Education meetings are held for the purpose of conducting the business of the school district and are not considered to be community meetings. Board members are not obligated to respond to issues raised during public comment. Normally, such issues are referred to or are followed up on by our administrators.
Thank you, Terry. We welcome our first speaker tonight, Daniel Smith. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Daniel Smith at 3022 Fleetwood Drive in Portage, member of Portage Linking Our Voices, or Portage Love. The speaker at a previous meeting was complaining about a book, which was apparently was in one of the libraries, seemed to insinuate that the Portage Public Schools was disseminating pornography. I think this is a gross disservice to our board, to our administration, librarians, and teachers. I haven't read this book that was in question. Apparently the movie Precious was based on it, and I haven't seen the movie either, but it sounds like a very difficult and disturbing read because of what happens to the protagonist. But it is wrong to read this difficult passage by itself without context in order to smear the district as allowing pornography. It was unbelievable and ironic also the offending book passage was read aloud, given its horrific graphic nature. I hope no young children were in the physical audience or listening online to that talk. From what I understand, the book was last checked out in 2014. It's not like it was required reading for first graders. I mean, let's have some trust, respect, and consideration for the professionalism of our teachers and our librarians. But let's face it, our society has some ugly aspects. However, problems in our society won't go away by simply removing any book that attempts to spotlight them. It's appropriate and necessary for intelligent and mature students to examine difficult, even painful issues in a proper context with proper guidance. Most importantly, I'm in support of keeping our schools and libraries abundantly and inclusively stocked with stories by, from, and for all who may see themselves in those pages. So I want to commend and thank our teachers and our librarians. They're doing a difficult job balancing the need to bring new ideas to our kids with the beliefs and sensibilities of parents against the backdrop of a polarized society. Real quickly, I want to read an opinion of a PCMS middle school student asked me to read this for her. Quote, "If we understand about what happens about that stuff, we'll know how to deal with it in the future." She says 80% of women are sexually, verbally, or physically assaulted in school. You can't ignore these things. It's dumb because these things happen all the time. There are guys in middle school that go around hitting girls' bottoms. These problems are probably occurring even more because people don't know how to deal with them. If you're uncomfortable by this book, you don't have to read it, unquote. Finally, the fact that this book was last checked out in 2014 should lead us to the conclusion that the real problem we need to deal with is not how to sanitize our libraries. On the contrary, the real problem we need to deal with is how to get more students into the library checking out books. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you for coming out tonight. Our next speaker is Kelly Sackett. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Kelly Sackett, and I'm going to speak about something that was sent to me today from a parent of a West Middle School student. And it was a survey that was provided to the students by the ELA teacher, and it's a social issues survey. So I'm going to read a bunch of the questions that were within the survey. Should teens be banned from trick-or-treating? Should the penny be retired? Should the driving age be increased to 18? Should the breeding standards be changed for purebred dogs? Should sugary drinks come with a warning label? Should schools go year-round? Are athletes overpaid? Should zoos be abolished? Should dodgeball be banned from the playground or phys ed class? Should the school year start later for middle and high school day? Should individuals be allowed to clone their beloved pets? Does jail time work to rehabilitate juvenile offenders? Does global warming really exist? Should the death penalty be illegal? Should minimum wage be raised? Should beauty pageants be allowed for small children? Should cell phones be banned in school? Do the police use too much force? Should parents vaccinate their children? Do helicopter parents harm their children? Should all students get a college degree? Should school lunches be regulated to become healthier? Are immigration laws too strict? Are humans the cause of climate change? Is feminism even necessary in modern day society? Are kids getting too much homework? Should people be allowed to carry concealed weapons? Should animal testing be allowed? Is the government spying too much on its citizens? Should there be stricter laws for animal abuse and animal cruelty? Is nuclear energy a good solution for fighting our environment and energy challenges in the U.S.? Should teens be allowed to play violent video games? Should sports teams have more safety precaution and laws to protect players? Is music therapy an effective way to treat patients with serious illness? Will the immigration reform be beneficial to the U.S.? Are humans having an impact on reducing the number of endangered species? Does music with explicit content cause people to do bad things? Is society addicted to the internet? Should the government do more to help the homeless? Do sports fans go too far? Can teens resist peer pressure? Do genetically modified / engineered foods harm the human body? Are people obese because they're lazy? Did social media cause people to lose basic social skills? Should brick and mortar schools be eliminated? Do magazines promote an unhealthy view of the human body? I'm just curious as to what this has to do with 8th graders that are in ELA.
Thank you, Kelly. Our next speaker is Veronica Egan. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Veronica Egan, and I have 3 children attending Portage Public Schools. I'm before you today to offer my 2 cents about the book Push by Sapphire and the place in our school libraries. Personally, I found this book very compelling because it lays bare many of the issues in our society, such as blaming the victim for abuse, shaming the person for feeling complicated and mixed emotions about the abuse and the abuser, especially if it's a family member, as well as our culture's propensity to ignore and neglect marginalized citizens. In addition to all of this, the book is also filled with love, joy, and hope, as the character, Precious, is allowed to be her whole true self through education and finding belonging with others who see her for more than her abuse. Because of all the points mentioned above, I feel it is important for our students to be exposed to the complicated issues that books like Push bring up. I feel this is an avenue to forming the skills necessary to navigate the uncomfortable questions and emotions that arise, rather than try to hide from them. Additionally, it is important to have stories such as this available to students who see themselves in Precious, because unfortunately, this does happen to people even in our community, and her experiences, to know they are not alone and are seen. Yes, this book is a brutal read at times and can be very upsetting and maybe even triggering in its depictions of sexual violence. But for me, these scenes help me feel very deeply for Precious, as well as understand her and the decisions she makes throughout the book. Now, I fully realize that my comments are based on my own very limited viewpoint, so I am so thankful that we have highly trained and educated librarians, teachers, and administrators to weigh the merits of the content books that are in our schools. I trust that they have the best interests of our children in mind and will make the decisions necessary to protect our students from material that is not conducive to learning, while also bringing in content that will broaden their minds and allow them to grow. On a personal note, I am trying to get beyond an us versus them mentality. So if anyone would like to sit and discuss a book like Push, please let me know. I welcome the opportunity to engage with others' thoughts and opinions, especially if they are different from mine, in the hope that we can find common ground and connection. Thank you. And I have a book here if anybody would like it.
Thank you, Veronica. Our last speaker tonight is Tim Earle. Welcome.
Tim Merle, 6862 Shelford Way, longtime listener, first-time caller, who came here to thank the board for the job you do, particularly those of you who've been here for a while. I know and I've seen that it's become a thankless, difficult job these last few years. You've endured verbal abuse from people airing political grievances, and you don't deserve that. When we moved here in 2006, we chose Portage largely because of the schools, and we're still happy with Portage Public Schools. It was great to hear an objective assessment of that earlier today. Just to let you know, my neighborhood is full of Kellogg's executives and doctors who work in Battle Creek and choose to live here in Portage because of our schools. That says a lot about our schools. I came here expecting to hear the usual drama that we didn't hear this week, drama and misinformation about LGBTQ issues in PPS. And I just wanted to let you know that I am very glad that PPS supports their LGBTQ students and faculty. And the fact that some people are upset about it just shows that it's needed. To listen to some people, you'd think this is really controversial, but if you talk to kids, and I talk to my kids about it, you'll see it's not. They don't care. They use preferred pronouns without even thinking about it. They don't care who uses what bathroom. It's amazing how these kids go with the flow like that. Parents who are uncomfortable with LGBTQ people are basically just projecting on their kids. I'm a little older than I look, old enough that my parents grew up uncomfortable with dark-skinned people and thought that segregation was just the way the world worked. Today's kids are going to look at their parents and their grandparents the same way I look at my parents. I love them, but I'm disappointed that they clung to those outdated and intolerant views. Think about what your kids and grandkids are going to think about you and these issues in the future. Kids need to be exposed to people that are different from them. Quick story to wrap up my time. When I graduated college and became a Navy officer, I met graduates of VMI and the Citadel, institutions that at that time were just being forced to admit women. And there were a lot of angry alumni who had a lot of things to say about that. And every single officer I met that graduated from one of those schools was a less effective leader because they didn't know how to deal with female subordinates, peers, and senior officers. We can't shelter our kids from LGBTQ issues and then expect them to become successful in college or the workforce. So I applaud you for what you do on that and not trying to force people back in the closet. Again, most of the community thinks you're doing a good job. Keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Tim. And thank you to all our speakers this evening. And take some time now for board trustee comments. Does anybody on the board have any comments this evening?
No? Appreciate the communications assessment as well as more information about your student work. And it's always good to be kept up to date about that. So thanks for that. Also, Johnny, I attended the play at Portage Northern yesterday, and I can assure you that the microphones are working really well. Good job. And I'm looking forward to seeing SpongeBob at Portage Central. So,
anyone else?
I kind of said my comments as we go on.
Well, I have a few. Number one is we regret receiving the resignation this past Friday of trustee Kurt Droppers after 8 years of service on the board. We will be accepting applications to fill this position through Friday, February 10th at 3 p.m. The link to the application can be accessed on our district homepage, and we'll be reviewing those applications at our next scheduled board meeting on February 13th, where we will either fill the position or schedule interviews for February 20. This process is governed by our bylaws. Also want to mention the annual K-RESA Career Connect event is scheduled for Tuesday, February 7th from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Air Zoo. This event is for middle and high school students to explore CTE options, education for the arts, as well as early middle college. It's a fantastic event, and it's usually very well attended if people are not aware of that. Now I had a couple of shout outs. The first is about a sports team you normally don't hear about, and that's the Portage Central Archery Team under head coach John Dunlop. A parent let us know that that team finished first this past weekend at the Howe Bullseye Blowout Tournament. Over 600 students participated in the tournament, including teams from Portage Central Middle and West Middle Schools. So congratulations to our archers. And finally, I want to recognize Jeff Wykrent and his students, including his student production manager, Robert Hayworth, and their CTE Engineering and Wood Technology class at Portage Northern. They were chosen to fabricate the seal used on the podium at the governor's inauguration. The project required using classroom knowledge and problem-solving skills, and the seal was fabricated on a laser engraver. But what an honor and a tribute to those students in that class. So there's some good news, more good news of things happening at Portage Public Schools. Okay, we can move on to the consent agenda, and all we have is the January 16, 2023 organizational meeting, Committee of the Whole work session minutes. Are there any exceptions to this, to these minutes? Everybody's good? Okay, the minutes then are approved from January 16th. And we'll now move to our first action item tonight, which is replacement of the wireless system in our new middle schools. Is there a motion, please, on page 17?
Mr. Van Antwerp, I move that the Board of Education approve the purchase of 170 access points and management system from Vector Tech Group of Holland, Michigan, in the amount of $110,560.94.
Thank you, Terry. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Vivian?
All right.
And welcome. There you are.
Good evening, everyone. I apologize. I'm a little impacted with some sinuses today. It's not COVID, so, but if I sound a little nasally, I apologize. As I indicated at our last meeting, we opened up proposals for replacement wireless systems over the break and immediately went to homework to review them. We got 6 wonderful proposals. We spent a lot of time getting detailed product demonstrations from the vendors, interviewing them, doing reference checks, and processing the proposals with a couple of outside independent analysts to give us their feedback on the proposals that we received. At this point in time, I'm recommending that we go with Vector Solutions. They're quoting a Ruckus system. I've spoken to over 5 school districts that are very similar to Portage that use this exact same system. They're all very, very happy. The one thing that I heard more than often than not from my fellow colleagues was once the system was installed, they haven't had to do anything. It just runs. And wouldn't that just be wonderful? The proposal itself that Vector wrote in my career might be one of the best RFP responses I've ever read. They really did their homework. They asked for building maps before they designed a solution. We talked a lot about our environment and the interference problems that we're having at the middle schools. And they actually recommended an access point that avoids the lower bands more aggressively in favor of access points that focus more on the higher bands. And as it so happens, those access points are cheaper, which knocked off about $23,000 off of the base bid. Anytime a vendor does that much homework ahead of time before just throwing a response at us, that impresses me. As I said, the reference checks went well, so we're going to proceed. We had our first engineering meeting with Vector last week on Friday. They have everything in stock and ready to go with the exception of the controller, but they are letting us borrow one of theirs so we can get the early config up and get everything staged and ready to rock and roll. We are scheduled to do our install over midwinter break, and the goal is to have both middle schools replaced before the students come back from that break. That's a very aggressive schedule, but it's what needs to be done. We might not get to all of the access points just because of some of the locations we have to bring lifts in and perhaps make some custom mounts. But for sure, in the academic areas of the buildings where we have the most problems, we can get those done. And then, we're going to run them through the month of March. And if all goes well, then we'll start the actual transactions with Vector in the month of April. As I mentioned at the last board meeting, we have submitted E-rate applications for this equipment, and I fully expect that half of the purchase price will be refunded to the district. So that's a very positive result. The other thing I would tell you that right now I have released a second RFP for an additional 700 access points. If this solution goes well, then it is my intent to get a bit more aggressive and this summer try to get the rest of our Cisco canopy that is quite frankly out of date, out of the district, and button this project up. The Cisco system is starting to have some blips. Makes me a little nervous from time to time, so I think this is the appropriate way to go. I'm obviously not going to issue any kind of a purchase order anytime soon, but I will be asking the board for preliminary approval on an action item at the last meeting in February. And what's driving that decision is so that we can also apply for E-rate funds for these access points and get that 50% discount. I just need a dated board action in the month of February to get that application done. I don't think we're going to need 700 access points to get the project done the rest of the district, but I'm padding my numbers right now until we get the site surveys done. One thing we'll learn after the system's installed at the middle schools, about a week in, Vector is going to come back and do updated heat maps of both middle schools while the students are in session and the system's under load, so we can make any final tweaks and get more runtime intel for what we want to do in the remaining buildings in the district. So I'm very excited. Again, I'm not making any guarantees. That's why we're doing a month-long trial. But Vector has done these type of installs in schools a lot like the ones we have here in Portage. They've been very successful, and I have a lot of confidence that we're moving in the right direction here. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions the board might have.
Jen, you did say that we were going to sell the present system.
Yes. Yeah, we should be able to find a market for it. This system is frequently out of stock, and a lot of smaller businesses in lower density environments, this is a real popular system because it's really cost effective. So.
Good to know.
Because there's nothing wrong with the system.
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with the system. I really don't. You know, we do have the interference issues in the middle schools. But interestingly enough, we have the same lighting system at West Middle School. And we see the same interference patterns there with that lighting system, but not nearly to the level that we see at Central and North. So I think it's the lighting system plus part of the construction in the building. And I think it's two things. I think it's 3 floors stacked on top of each other. So we're getting not only, competing noise coming in from the sides, but also coming in from up and down. And there's also a lot of prefab reinforced concrete in the new schools, and all that extra steel tends to wreak havoc with radio waves. I would still love to get an actual RF specialist in the district to come in and take a look at it. I have not found someone yet. I've spoken with very good wireless engineers, but I would love to get more of a pure physics-orientated person to come in and take a dive at it that way. And if I find someone, we'll do that. But still, we have to move ahead with what we're going to do here.
And how long has this been going on? Over a year, right?
It's been going on since we opened the buildings,
Okay,
but it hasn't been consistent. And one of the reasons why this has taken so long, we opened up North Middle School and started debugging the problem, but then COVID came along, and we all had to shift gears. And then we started to open back up from COVID. We saw the same problems at Central Middle School, and then we realized we had a more serious problem. And if the board recalls, I did bring a proposal to you earlier to replace the systems as a trial. But due to supply chain issues back then, we were never able to get the parts we needed to do that. So we finished last year strong. We started this year strong, and then it just picked up again. And that's been honestly the most frustrating thing for me in trying to manage this with the technology team. The problem hasn't been consistent, and there's more than one factor in play, and that makes diagnosing things very, very difficult. But like I said, we brought several different outside consultants in to look at the existing system. They verified we've got it set correctly, our systems are good. They keep saying, we don't know why it doesn't work, it should just work. And that's great to hear that we did it right, but it's also not helpful in actually, moving forward with a solution.
I was contacted by multiple people, several community members from our community, mentioning concerns about the LED lights interfering. And you mentioned that yourself, that there is, similar with West, but we have multiple floors in the middle schools. How would having this system counteract that, or is it just going to be the same problem continuing?
So this system does two things differently. That's a great question. The first thing, and this is one of the things that was really impressed me with the Vector response, is they looked at that problem and specifically chose access points that avoid the bandwidth where the interference is. The interference is limited to the lower bands, and this solution is going to more aggressively target the higher bands. But the other thing with our current system, it can only auto-tune itself once a day, and it's during the middle of the night, because it actually has to take the access points offline to do that work. Taking those samples at night when all the lights are off and no one's in the building hasn't been very helpful. This system can much more aggressively, in real time, tune the radios while they're being used to combat any different waves of interference that might come into the facility. And so those two things will certainly help.
Okay. Couple quick comments, and then I have a follow-up question. In the comments that I received from community members, I received mention that apparently Vector is an excellent company to work with. So I was very pleased to hear that and see that. Someone commented that using E-rate was extremely wise and a really great idea, so thank you very much for that also. You mentioned an initial install. Is that going to operate as a test run before we buy a full system?
Yes.
With this? And so if it doesn't work, what will happen?
We'll abandon it and have to, try something different.
Okay.
We are obligated to provide reliable Wi-Fi to our middle schools.
Oh, yeah.
And probably more than any other level in our curriculum. The middle schools rely on online curriculum and teaching tools. I mean, all levels do, but even more so at the middle school level. But again, with all the homework that I've done, all the people that I've talked to, I'm as optimistic with this proposed solution as I think I can be at this point in time. Like I said, I do have an RFP out for the remaining of the parts for the system, and I'm going to ask for board action on that in February, but I'm not going to act on it until we know for sure this solution is going to work.
Okay.
I just need the board approval so I can get the E-rate apps in and reclaim that money.
Yeah, the biggest concern was if we're not changing the lights, is it just going to continue the problem?
We will know very soon.
And we will find out. That sounds like an excellent idea. And as I said, there were many positives also that came through to me. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions for Dan?
Just a comment, and we really appreciate your diligence in trying to get this taken care of. And I know you've been around the district for a long time, more than 20 years. You've been part of so many technology move forwards over that time. If you think back, that's, 2001? That was a long time ago. And we've come a long way since then, and you have led us through all of that. So I know you're doing the right thing.
Thank you.
Very quickly, hey, Dan, we're approving 110,000. Does the math work that if we get the E-rate, that drops to 55, or is it 220 and it, okay, no, 110 would drop?
This is pre-E-rate. Part of the E-rate rules, just in case for some reason our application is not accepted. But, so I'm working with the E-rate process gets a little complicated, but I have no doubt that we're going to be successful with these applications at this point in time. So,
my only other comment here is this is one of the few issues where students have actually come and stood where you're standing and so this is an important milestone, and I know you've kind of stair-stepped up the solutions on this, and so I appreciate everybody hanging with it, and students have spoken to us over the last couple of years, so Fingers crossed, man.
I live with students who speak to me about it.
Yeah.
So, you mentioned Cisco. Is that the one that's in the high schools, or?
Cisco Canopy is everywhere except
Okay.
the administration buildings, Central Middle School, and North Middle School. It dates back to 2009. I've been very, very happy with the radios. We don't get quite as much density on them. The biggest Achilles heel on that system, and it's just how all these systems were done back in the day, the Cisco system has a centralized controller that actually run the access points. They're not very smart. And if that controller is not working properly, the entire canopy doesn't work properly. This system, and pretty much all systems moving forward, there's still a controller that you use for centralized management. But for some reason, if that controller goes offline, if there's enough intelligence in the access points, they can keep running until you can get that controller repaired and back online.
I think I get daily updates on how well the wireless is working in the high school here.
Any other questions, comments? All those in favor of approving the replacement wireless recommendation, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion passes. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate all your work. The last thing we have to do tonight is buy some calculators. Is there a motion, please, on page 22?
President Van Antwerp, I move that the Board of Education approve the purchase of TI-30X HS and TI-84 Plus CE calculators from Office Depot for $63,989, the funds for which will come from ESSER 3.
Thank you, Terry. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Hello, welcome.
Good evening, Superintendent Beelang and trustees. Dr. Sheehan and I are here tonight to talk to you about some calculators, so a little Wi-Fi, some calculators. We have been working towards outfitting our middle school math classrooms and our high school classrooms with those calculators, those specific calculators. Over the past couple years, COVID hit, lost some calculators along the way. We felt that with the use of ESSER funds, this would be a great way to go ahead and just finish off that process of making sure every single classroom in every single math classroom in middle school and high school had a set of 30 calculators. We will be using our barcoding system that will be then checked out to those teachers. Makes life a lot easier in the classroom for similar calculators. Teachers are able to help support, problem solve, students know how to use them, and then when they go into standardized testing, they know their tool. So we'd like to propose that we go ahead and pass this recommendation for 450 TI-84 calculators and 110 TI-30X calculators today, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about some fun calculators today.
What percentage of students bring their own calculators?
It's a little hit and miss.
Yeah.
It depends on if they remember it that day, but we do know that a majority of the math teachers, both at middle school and high school, have reported that having a set inside the room is essential, because there is a large majority that are not bringing their calculators. And we don't necessarily want to make that an expectation for all students and families to have to purchase one if we are able to provide them.
Any other questions?
May I speak up? Okay. So I'm a math teacher. I've taught all the way up through calculus. Absolutely 100%, you need a full classroom set. Absolutely. Less disruption during testing. The kids, first of all, especially with no backpacks, carrying a calculator to from class is the first thing that's likely to fall out of your arms if you're doing it. We don't need that, especially since they are expensive. Second point, equity standpoint. For parents who can't afford it, those things are expensive, especially the TI-84s, which are good, excellent calculators, I will say. Where it comes from a teacher's standpoint, and this is why I know it's going to be approved, but I'm assuming it'll be approved. But I'm going to, yeah. From a teacher's standpoint, having all the same calculator in the class is essential. because invariably you have a parent who's done the right thing, who's looked at the back of the calculators, I'm guilty, and said, ooh, this one's about $30 or $40 cheaper. I think you'll do the same thing. My budget needs this. And you buy that for the child. And the teacher then, while teaching calculus, invariably trying to do something, graphing, teaching row-reduced echelon forms, something like that, that calculator does not have the same key patterns that you need to hit to get there, and you're suddenly losing 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes of instructional time trying to teach that one student how to do what you planned for the lesson to teach everybody else to do, and you've now lost the class, you've lost instructional time. That's not good. Absolutely not good. Let them keep it at home. If they can't afford it, they can use Desmos on their Chromebook, which is awesome, but they do need the practice in class, so they can use it on the standardized tests. The ACT, the SAT, you can't use your Chromebook on it. Where I have questions, after I've done all these really great things, and I think that's excellent that we're buying them, and let's just leave it at that, I was curious, and my brain went, ooh, how much is each calculator individually? And I went to Amazon, and turns out it's $119.95, which is about $120, so you multiply that times 450, blah, 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 you get to a total of $54,000, which is a little different than the $62,460. So then I was thinking, what about chargers, right? Because you don't want all those cords plugging them in because these are rechargeable. So that's $89 each, so 45 of those, we come to a total that's about $4,000, $4,005, which still doesn't reach us that $8,000 discrepancy that I had from that first number. So then I did a little math because, that would end up being about 4 additional calculators per classroom, 34 instead of 30, which as a teacher would be an immense blessing. Is there any way to work it out to do that?
Well, we did, our finance department did bid this out to several companies just to see which one we could go with, looking at the lowest price. I would be curious just to even talk to you more about what type of charger you looked at versus these are the ones that set into the charger.
It was 10 at a time. The only difference is that if you look at the price of, they call it a teacher pack, that was much more than your quote, so you did a better job if you're looking at teacher packs. This would be buying individually and then buying the 10 chargers. As a teacher, I can say that having those 4 additional calculators per classroom, you have the one that didn't seat properly and therefore didn't charge. You have the one that somehow someone did something to it and you can figure it out in the evening, but not in the middle of the class. Any of those, having some spares on hand would be a blessing.
We will have some spares on hand through our Destiny system, that checkout system, so there will be those available. And we do order these as those sets of 30, so they do come in those classroom sets. And that we work with the Omnia partner, that contract, so that's why we didn't have to do that RFP piece. So that's kind of how that process works there. I know sometimes we look on Amazon too and we're like, no, yes. And then you go to order like a ton of things and they're like, yeah, no, you get 5 of them. So walking through this process through Office Depot oftentimes is our better way to do a big order. And we're able to do that successfully.
And that's good to know. And my concern is not the calculators, is not the need for the calculators, is not any of that. Is trying to make it a little easier, just those extras for the teachers. And by the way, the TI-30X is the current version of one of my 2 favorite calculators ever to use. So good choice, excellent, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions?
All those in favor of approving the calculator purchase recommendation, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. The calculators are on the way. We've reached the end of our agenda, and we're adjourned. Thank you.
All right.
You survived. You even got some seconds.
Yeah, I got it. When are our new trustees going to be?
I feel like we're in a controversial issue.
Terry to just kind of sit tight.
We'll just be as big as it used to
To let someone, okay.
Testify for a living.
Don't need to say no.
Timer is passionate.
the shoes.
Seriously, then.
Mine, and then they.
Yeah, well, the first motion behind it. And
It was a really big process, and they were getting.
we don't want to let Randy.
I'm imagining that's.
Seriously, sit here.
I worked with kids, and they're like,
Someone mad at me?
Everybody has their own governing style. So, yes.
I know.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate anyone who that it takes pride in, and I appreciate every